Hi everyone, this is Brandon again with the Shelby Township Library. I'm so happy to have you here. Today we're going to talk about the hardware basics of a computer. What makes a computer, what's in here, and what do we need to know when we go shopping for one. This program is perfect for people who are just getting introduced to this and have heard some new terminology and maybe it's not making sense. So, let's dive right in. What is a computer? A computer is going to be a collection of parts that does some kind of service for you. So some kind of calculations, it does math. Our old calculators could be considered computers. We have here a tower from the library. This is called a tower because it kind of is towering over everything here. And inside, we are going to have all sorts of parts here that we're going to discuss, but this is a computer. Now at home, you may have something like an e-reader, your iPad, your Kindle, a Nook. Those are all also computers. Computers come in all shapes and sizes. Your smartphone is a computer. This little tiny guy right here, we call a Raspberry Pi, is also a computer. It has a lot of the parts that are in here, just a lot smaller. Certainly it's not as powerful as some of these guys, but it's a lot more convenient to use for some different activities. And then we have our iPhone, same parts in here, just different purpose, maybe a little more high-end, but all three of these guys can do the same kinds of tasks. Let's get started on the terminology we're going to use when discussing a computer. The term hardware is one you've probably heard before. I just used it now. Hardware is anything physical we can touch when it concerns a computer. So the ports, the cables, all of the RAM and the storage and the memory cards and the processors. If it's a physical thing we can touch, it's hardware. So then, what is software? Software is going to be the computer coding, the processes that accomplish some form of a task. So the software could be the operating system on a computer, such as a Windows operating system or an Apple operating system, or on an iPhone you have the iOS operating system. There are so many different kinds of operating systems that allow you to get a task finished. Software could also be word processors like Microsoft Word or Apple Pages, the Excel spreadsheets and numbers. These are all different programmed pieces of code that help you accomplish a task, make beautiful photos, connect with friends over Facebook. Really, software can be relatively endless, and you've probably used a lot more software in your life than you expected. When you go and use a self-checkout machine at Kroger or Meijer or the local grocery store, that machine, the physical part of it, is hardware. But when you cross the item across the screen and it goes boop, that is software that is scanning the food. And these two work together to help accomplish tasks. So, when we get into the hardware element, you've probably heard of RAM, or memory. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. This is a computer's short-term memory. So, how much memory it has in the moment to help accomplish a task. The classic analogy is, how big is that highway? We have information going back and forth. Is it a 5-lane highway, 16-lane highway? So, back in the day, we were talking about a gig or two or 526 megabytes of RAM. or random access memory. Don't get hung up on the megabytes or the gig thing right now, but the bigger the number and the word gig following it is good. And right now, the common amount of memory is about 8 gigs of memory, give or take. Cell phones have about 3 or 4 gigs in there. That would be like this smartphone here. Big guys like this will have about 8 to 16. And if we are doing something like processing for Pixar and Disney, we're probably into the multitudes of a number that we're never going to have to deal with. Maybe not even touch a computer with that number. We're looking at over 64 gigs, and that's for some high-end video gaming and things like that. So when we're talking RAM, we're thinking short-term memory that helps accomplish tasks. If your computer starts to kind of slog when it's doing something, it's a possibility that what you're doing requires a lot of thought, computer-wise, and that those lanes are getting congestion. So that's a wonderful thing to think about. If you're shopping for a computer, we do always want the most RAM we can affordably get. Next, we're going to have hard drive. Hard drive goes by a couple different names these days. We are going to have an HDD hard drive. That's going to be your classic. It's using magnets, and it's going to be a heavier piece of an object. It's going to have some moving parts in it and a spindle, and it's spinning really quick. And then you'll have solid state. Solid state is going to be what it sounds like. It's not moving, it's not spinning, it's really fast. It's just going to be a brick just like this. In your mobile devices, you'll have a solid state. Just a tiny chip in there, probably smaller than our thumb, that holds a lot of information. Now, the difference between RAM and a hard drive is, remember we said RAM or memory is random access memory. That means that when we turn off the computer, we turn off our phone, we turn off our small device, we turn off the tower, it's gone. The computer forgets it. It just wipes away. A hard drive, it's built to remember and last and have this information last long after you turn off the computer. And it does that in a lot of different ways we're not going to get into here, but it's really impressive, and it's come so very far. So when we talk about a solid state drive, we're talking about, again, something that doesn't move, and it's much more advanced than a hard drive with lots of spinning components in it. It's much sturdier. It's also much more expensive, which is why you don't see a lot of towers come with it until much more recently, as the prices kind of come down a little bit. When you have a lot of space like this, it tends to be the classic hard drive that takes up more space. It could be a little bit slower, but it's much more cost efficient. The other pro to a solid state drive, of which there's many, is that it's not as fragile. If I were to drop my iPhone, I don't have to really be concerned about the storage unit on the device. I have to be concerned about the screen or the display. But if I drop this large tower, there's moving parts in that hard drive, and it does not like that. That sudden shock, it can break the spindle or the mechanism that's holding all that memory, all that storage of information, and we're out of hard drive. We'd have to find somebody from the Geek Squad or our local professionals in the area to help us recover that information. Next up, we've used the terms megabytes and gigs. We're going to talk about what is a byte. A byte is an individual piece of information. That is according to Standard Britannica definition. So a megabyte is 1 million individual bytes. A gigabyte is 1 billion individual bytes or pieces of information. And now we're even going into terabytes, which is even larger. Many of our video game consoles now have terabytes of information. The video games have gotten that large. It's pretty exciting. They do all sorts of different things with all of this collected information. A megabyte is going to be about 500 pages of information. So a 500-page book is 1 megabyte. I'm sorry, 1 megabyte. A gigabyte is going to be about an hour and 20-minute movie, 8 hours of music, or 595 pictures. The reason I use about for all of this is that it's really relative when we're talking about how we're storing this information. How high definition are these photos? Are we taking really professional photos with those high-end cameras? Or are we using our old 3-megapixel Nikon that we've kept in our drawer and just found? There's what's called compression and how this information is stored. And compression also is exactly what it sounds like. How can we squish these large files of information, all these bytes down, to really get the most out of our storage? Then there's all these different software in here that will take that squished information and expand it for us. So then we won't lose any of the quality of that image, and we'll have the same product we had, the same song, the same movie, the same picture we took. When we're shopping for a computer, the standard tends to be about 128 gigs for a mobile phone, for a solid state drive. If we're going to have one of our classic hard drives with the moving parts, they tend to be about 500 gigs to 1,000. Now, depending on what you do with your device or what your intentions are, really kind of helps you decide what do you need. If you are a casual user of a device, you just have a smartphone, you enjoy taking some pictures, you want to peruse Facebook, 64 gigs or 128 gigs of storage is plenty for you. If you are somebody who is creating a media center for your TV at home and you want to store a lot of movies on a tower, you're going to want terabytes of information because each movie is going to be sizable and it's going to fill up very quickly. So this storage can come in lots of different ways. Here we have our little Raspberry Pi, and if I spin it around here, I'm going to have a tiny little micro SD card. That neat little guy there, that is storage. This little SD card may be the same one that you would have in your phone to expand storage. If you have an iPhone, you're not provided with that option, but that's one of the reasons lots of people enjoy an Android phone, is they really like that ability to have a port on the side that you can put that storage device, that SD card, in here, and you can expand storage. And you can do the same thing on this tower here. If we get up and we mosey on over here, you'll see this guy was falling off the whole time. I took it apart a little bit before we were filming here. We will actually have an expansion bay here. So towers have the luxury of being able to expand their storage. We're not going to be using little SD cards to put in there. That might be a little bit silly. However, there are lots of options. One of the complicated parts about shopping for a new computer these days is cables and ports. What are we working with? What is a USB? I have a whole drawer full of these things. They're frustrating. They used to work. Why can't we just all have the same cable? We've all asked this, and we're getting to the point that we may finally have just a few cables to use for everything. So, when we're taking a look at our cables here, we have USB, which is a standard for computers for transferring and exchanging information and powering devices. And we start with USB-A. So plugging in from one device to another, exchanging information, powering things. This gives a computer lots of opportunities to enhance its capabilities. We call these peripherals. Our favorite little mousey here is a peripheral. Sometimes we'll call them a hardware peripheral because we can touch it. It's not necessarily programming, though there is a lot of programming in there. But we can plug this into a port on one of our devices that has a USB, and we can power this device. And we'll have them right here, and we will have them right up here in front. So you don't have to have a large tower. Laptops have USBs, phones have USBs, tiny little devices have USBs. We just plug them in, and it's excellent. They work. They do what they're supposed to. Some phones, it doesn't work because, as you found, things keep changing. So, next up here, we have a micro USB. We still have our USB-A here to plug in things and charge, but then we have this micro USB. This allows for smaller form factors. We saw this a lot on a lot of our portable digital cameras. We saw this a lot on tiny little widgets we buy from our, some of our local stores here selling picture frames that let you have digital photos on there, little tiny fans that we could plug into our computer. That would be a peripheral. Lots going on here. At one point, they could even charge some game controllers. That was popular. We're kind of moving away from that a little bit. But again, you'll see them for transferring information, powering old phones. They're great. We like them. Next up, we have a USB-B, B as in boy, and you would see this a lot for data transfer, for printers and hardware that you would plug into your computer. We still have this standard here. We can plug it into the computer, no problem. But if you see what I did here, and we all do this together, there's only one way it can go in. And it frustrates everyone. You kind of got to struggle to get things in. Nobody liked it. The Geek Squad didn't like it. The IT crowd didn't like it. All of us together as a community, we were putting things in, and it was just clinking, and it was frustrating. So, we had a solution. USB-C. We love USB-C. If we take a look at USB-C, there's no wrong way to plug it in. This was a win for everyone. We could talk about how it can transfer more data, how it powers things faster, how it's kind of becoming a standard for a lot of things. I would make an argument one of the reasons it's becoming a standard is it has that lack of frustration. You plug it in the device, it works. There's no guessing which side to put it in. We love it. But also powers things really quickly. You'll see lots of new mobile devices. They have this USB-C because it's charging things faster than ever. It's fantastic. It's important to remember the caveat to that is that you need to have a powerful little wall mount USB plug into a wall here that's producing enough power to relay it to your device. So finally, we have an HDMI cable. This high definition cable, it provides information relaying back and forth to visual devices. So if you notice, a lot that we were talking about was relaying power, it was relaying information, data. USB-C and HDMI can both relay visual information. So powering up information to, not powering the display with an HDMI, but relaying sound and data to make beautiful popping displays. This has become the standard. There are different ways like DisplayPort cables and some VGAs and things we can get into. But if you were shopping for a computer, you would want to look for a USB-C and you would want to look for an HDMI port. And again, this all depends on what you're doing, what your intentions with the device are. But if you were looking to shop for something that was going to stay modern and not be left in the dust, USB-C and HDMI are two standards that are going to be around for a while. For all of these, you're going to hear about different versions. There's going to be upgrades to these. When you look at a computer tower, that's why there's always a USB port that's a little blue. That is because it's an upgraded version of USB that allows faster data transfer, faster charging. Maybe it has some kind of new international standard that it's following. There could be lots of different reasons. So, another popular thing that we hear is the GPU, the graphic processing unit. The GPU, or the video card, is what allows the computer or the processor to do calculations on images. It's what's putting the picture on the screen. So it does this through its calculations, and the popular questions is kind of how quick can it do that? How fast is it? And sometimes devices, it will be mounted right into it. But if you have a tower like this, there's actual ports in there to put something the size of this phone right into it, into this computer, and its entire purpose is to make graphical calculations. And these can get so powerful and amazing that they're creating like our beautiful Pixar films. They're making all that amazing movie animation and special effects. Some of the simpler ones, they can make some of those fun cheesy effects that you see on TV because they're not making that huge fancy stuff. It's just a little simpler. You'll also see these GPUs in lots of our video game consoles. Those huge towers out there like the PlayStation 5 are going to have incredibly advanced graphic processing units, or GPUs. Some guys, a little smaller, a little more portable, like the Raspberry Pi, it's going to actually be built into the board, and it's not all that powerful. Sure, it'll let you watch some YouTube, it's going to let you word process and things like that, but we are not going to be playing Destiny 2 or World of Warcraft on this guy. It just doesn't have the guts for it. So, if we turn it around here, we'll see this guy right over here. This is for one of our last cables that some people might think is going by the wayside, but is still incredibly important if you're doing any kind of IT work. And that's our Ethernet cable. Our Ethernet cable is what plugs into the wall and it gets our internet to our little device here. And so we're so used to having so much internet wireless, bouncing around the library, bouncing around Tim Hortons, all over town, Some cities have even had this large network installed for them, so you can just power on your device, connect to these wireless signals somewhere. But for lots of buildings, for your home, you're going to have an Ethernet cable that plugs into your device. That's what helps connect your device to the internet. Which brings us to our next topic. We spoke about computers, and we kind of talked about how they video game, they word process, they come in all shapes and sizes. But there are two computers that are very popular in homes all across America, and that's going to be a modem, a router, and sometimes they get combined and they're called a gateway. So a modem is a tiny little computer. Usually you see them about 4 of these together, not like 4 of these units, but you know, they're not too big. They're smaller than a shoebox. And you'll get them from your internet provider if you want to, from Comcast, from Huawei, from AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. And you'll have this Ethernet cable or a coaxial cable, like one of those old TV cables. You'll plug them into this dedicated computer that's task is to provide your home internet. So great, the internet's provided to that item you put in the wall. We would have these products called switches or cables that we would plug them into the back of the tower and things like that. But now we want internet. We want internet. It's become almost synonymous with wireless, with mobile internet. We don't want to be tethered anymore. So we purchase these things called a router. A router is what allows us to create a home network, or a LAN, a local area network. And plugging in that router into your modem gives your home wireless internet. Then you can be on the other side of the house. You're not plugging in anything to an Ethernet anymore. If we take a look at a mobile phone, there's nowhere to plug in an Ethernet. It's just gathering the information from the internet that's floating around home. It's pretty fantastic, and we've all gotten really used to it. The idea of having to plug our device in for the internet is kind of something only video gamers or people with incredibly high definition home entertainment systems are into. The rest of us, we love having a modem and a router together, and sometimes they're called a gateway. They're combined because they're so synonymous working together. So, we've talked about modems, we've talked about routers. They're both computers. Mobile phones are going to have that same kind of wireless receiver in there, and there's going to be a couple different standards. You're going to hear about A, BGN, all sorts of different things. It's changing pretty rapidly, I would say. Things are getting better all the time, so don't get overwhelmed if when you go shopping somebody says, oh, that's so last year. Things are changing quick. So with that, we've talked about our cables, we've talked about our graphics cards and our peripherals, we've talked about our routers and our modems. What else is there? Well, now we have our Google Homes, our Amazon Alexas, our refrigerators have our computers in them with little cameras to take a look inside and tell us what's in our fridge. So one of the last things to talk about, if we're computer shopping, is this whole display thing. When you're shopping, one of the common things when you look at one laptop and one monitor, you look at a mobile phone, they're talking about this 4K thing. They're talking about high definition, ultra high definition, 120 hertz refresh rate, and pro displays. There's so many terminologies. What's going on? So, if we take it back a little bit, we're going to talk about the graphical units and it's doing these processes, and we're putting it on a display. A display is our monitor. A display is the front of your cell phone. A display can be the tiny little picture frame that you have that is rotating images and things. It takes pixels or little light emitting diodes, little bits of information in a display to create a vast image. And so when we are talking about like 720p, we're talking 720 pixels in that local area to give you a quality image on that device. So we can see how this escalates. If we're talking about 720 pixels there, then we hear about 1080. So 1080 is going to be better than 720, obviously. If we go to 4K, we're talking 4,000 pixels put in there versus that 720. So that's when you go into, the media store and you see that movie and it looks like it's going to hop off the wall. They have at least a 4K TV screen. They're going to have some particular format. There's a lot of different ways. LED, there was plasma once upon a time. There's OLED, there's Ultra LED. But when we're taking a look at a monitor, we like to see 4K now. 4K is what's given us that lifelike pop in our media. You'll see some libraries purchasing Blu-ray DVDs. Blu-ray DVDs are going to be all of those extra gigs of information onto a disc that's specifically made for those displays that are 4K, so it really pops off the screen. If you're not using your computer device for consuming media, I recommend at a minimum the 1080p because it makes text easier to read. We like to have more pixels, not just because it makes really cool movies, but because it makes it easier on the eyes when you're reading the news, when you're reading emails, when you're looking at bank statements. It's pretty important, but you only buy what you can afford. You're still going to get the same experience on your computer if you have less of a display. The display does not impact the tower. The display impacts what your eyeballs see. So, we've chatted about the USBs. We've chatted about peripherals. We've kind of talked about the different parts, the gigs, which is in the storage, that's the permanent storage, and the RAM, or the random access memory, that is the highway of information going back and forth, that when you power down your device, it forgets everything. We've chatted about our cables. There are many, and we did not cover them all. There are still so many proprietary cables, like the FireWire that Apple uses, all sorts of different Thunderbolt cables. And these can all be used for different types of tasks. But if you're just shopping for a basic computer, you don't really have to concern yourself with one that's just going to get the job done. We'd like to know about USB-C because your phone is probably going to be charged that way, and your device is likely to have some USB ports on it. It's kind of challenging to find one without some. So let's just do a little bit of troubleshooting for a moment. We're going to sit back down here, and when you turn on a computer, there's usually some kind of jingle. There's going to be a hardware logo. It'll say Dell or HP. And when you're interacting with a tower or a lot of Windows products, Macs tend to be a little bit fancier, so we're going to leave it out of there. But it still can happen. Sometimes you'll hear a beep. That beep is actually a system check for your computer. So when you hear that, nothing's wrong. That's just your computer going, "We okay? Yeah, we okay. We're good. Let's computer together." So then it will start and it'll go through its startup processes and we're great to go. On a bad day, you might hear beep, beep. Those multiple beeps, that's letting you know that there's something wrong. Depending on the creator of the computer, the beep code could mean something relatively different from my understanding. It'd be great to go and visit a specialist as soon as you can and let them know you heard 2 beeps, you heard 3 beeps, you heard 8 beeps. What that's going to do is when this BIOS, this guts of the computer, starts up, it does a hardware check of everything. So 3 beeps may mean, hey, we were looking for random access memory and we don't know where it is. We couldn't find it. It may go beep, 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 and it's telling you that code means we can't find the hard drive or the graphics unit. Something's misfiring here, and you need to take a look at the physical device. So my recommendation, when you have that kind of experience, if it turns on and lets you do its thing, you do your thing, turn it off, and look up on another device, what does that beep mean? It's not terribly common anymore, but it is common in those circumstances where, let's say I was moving and I dropped my tower on the ground. It may be beeping at me afterwards telling me that my storage is broken. It's important to be careful. If our device isn't turning on, this is not an uncommon problem. If you take any kind of electronics course in life, or you had somebody with some electronic wisdom, there's a common go-to that they will, almost like a mantra. Did you check that it's plugged in? Always check the power source on your phone, on your computer, on your towers, laptops, media center. Make sure that it's plugged in. Is it plugged into a source where if you hit the light switch, it powers it down and cuts all power from the wall? We've all done it to ourselves. This can be incredibly frustrating because we feel like an airhead when we realize, oh, it was never plugged in to begin with, or the battery is dead on this. So make sure it's charged in and make sure the charger is working. Take your charger to take your phone in the cable and plug it into a reliable USB you know works. And this can save you a lot of frustration and a lot of stress in thinking you may have to replace your gadget. Another common conversation is my internet's not working on my computer. One of the most common things that happen is we either shut off in our software, in our operating system, we shut off our internet capabilities, or there's something called airplane mode. Airplane mode is what it sounds like. Again, sometimes the naming isn't that creative. Airplane mode allows you to use your device on an airplane. There's lots of radio frequencies coming off from these devices, and apparently it frustrates airplanes. Not an airplane mechanic, but the logic seems sound to me. If we had 300 people on an airplane and all their cell phones were making signals, it seems like that could be kind of frustrating for the computer mechanisms on the plane. So the developers created an option that just cuts off the radio signals from the device. Believe it or not, since Windows is made for laptops and towers, this tower would have that button as well. You'll find it in the bottom right-hand corner of your Windows operating system. On Apple, you'll have to go through a few different menus. You'll find it in the top right corner. You can always go into search bar and type in airplane. So, we've chatted about that. Let's say you plugged in your mouse or your printer, something like that, and it doesn't work. The computer's just not reading it. You have a couple different options here. Before you go and you call somebody, we're going to try a few different things. We're going to plug in our peripheral into the device, turn off the device, wait a little bit, give it a little bit of a rest, do a couple deep breathing exercises, turn the computer back on, and sometimes when it's doing that whole process there of starting, it will download whatever it needs to run the mouse, run the keyboard, run the printer. It may pop up in the corner and say, hey, this printer's not runnable right now, but if you click this link here, we can download a driver and get you going. Fantastic. That can solve the problem a lot of the times. If that's not the case, if we go to the bottom left-hand side of Windows, you'll have a little search bar there. Type in check for updates. Windows and Apple and Google, Amazon, they're all fantastic at running updates. Updates are little changes to the software of the computer system that can help it run better. It can protect you from creeps on the internet, malicious actors, all those kinds of things. But sometimes when we're a little protective here and Google and Amazon and Windows make a change, it may make it so it just stops talking to our mouse. Now, because these devices are so incredibly common, they usually chat with all those other organizations, and before they make the change, they let everybody know. They all chat. Things get what are called beta tested, and they make sure there's nothing funky that happens before it releases to you and I. But if you bought something that's maybe a little off the beaten path, that is something that can happen. We want to make sure that we update our computer. It helps it run faster. It protects it. You get new features sometimes. Sometimes they move a thing and it's really annoying, but all of the pros outweigh the cons. Finally, about modems, routers, and gateways. You can update those computers as well, usually from your mobile device, but the instruction manual will also provide you a way to do it by accessing the actual device through a internet browser. A lot of the times in experience with individuals, all you need to do is unplug them and allow it to what's called power cycle or hard reset. Just unplug the power from the wall for both of those devices. Again, do a couple deep breathing exercises. Go make a sandwich. Go pet a cat. Wait, a good 5-10 minutes. Come back, plug them in, and they're going to go through their processes, possibly update some things on there, download some new things from your cable and internet provider, and you should be back to service with your internet and watching all the cute videos you want. We covered a lot of ground today. There's plenty more that we could cover, but again, this is just to kind of cover the basis of if you were wanting to go to Best Buy tomorrow or Walmart and computer shop, that you are familiar with the terms that they are going to use. So, hard drive stores things, memory, it provides that ability to do a lot of things fast. You want a graphics card, it's probably built in. In fact, like 90% of the time it's built into any device, some form of it. If you're not video gaming, you don't really have to worry about it. Cables. Cables are, consolidating at a nice pace now. We like USB-C. It's our friend. It's going to be around for a while. Peripherals, hardware peripherals will be like our mouse and our keyboard, be like our CD drive and our camera. And as always, if you were to purchase a new device or have any questions, I hope you'll contact your library. Appreciate you stopping by today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.